Alright, I'm going to give you a walk around of the boat and how everything functions. Ignition switch, depending on what side it's on. You have it, your ACC port. You have your breaker. You have your steering. There's your dead man switch. Basically, you clip that on. If anything happens, that comes out, shuts the motor off. Here is your choke. You may or may not need it, this depends. You have your steering, throttle. There is a tension knob right there that you can loosen that up and the throttle will return by itself, or you can tighten it up and it will hold your throttle. You can go hands-free going down the river. Alright, your windshield, self-explanatory. You have your clips, everything comes off. Okay, your storage hatch, self-explanatory. Alright, the hood. Comes off. You have your engine. Depending on whether or not there's a water-cooled muffler, you have connector. You have your throttle linkage. You have your choke linkage. Pull to the back, slide it back, and tuck your linkage back there behind the fuel tank. This would be the shut-off connector switch for the dead man switch. That's the connector for that. You have your fuel tank fitting. I usually just tuck that inside the linkage there so it's out of the way. You have your ignition box connector, your battery connector. Here's your pull start connector if you have it hooked up. That simply unscrews. Alright, now before we slide the motor out, you're going to want to unhook the pump water for the muffler. That's under the clamp, and just slide the pump back to disengage it from the clutch, so you can take the lever, locking lever, move it to the front. Now the motor will be able to move forward and then pull straight out. And the motor's out. There's nothing to worry about with the clutch. That's supposed to be loose like that. That's part of the design to allow any flex and this alignment to be present without causing damage. You check your oil and fill your oil from there. There's another one on this side, but it's easier to reach this one for me, so I always use that one. When you're putting the motor in, be careful. This is your vacuum hose for your fuel pump. It's hooked to the carburetor spacer. But as you're putting it in, you want to make sure you clear the hull with it. But once it drops down to the motor mounts, you can push it back or use the lever. That will lock it in place. I will show you the wear ring since we have the pump out here. The wear ring, usually a twisting motion, will make it to pull out. The force of the clamp drawing the pump to the housing is what locks this in place. This is why you can install it and remove it with no tools, because this ring is a little bit deeper than what the pump ring is. And when you're checking for clearance, you can drop the ring over the pump, and that's about where you want to see it. That's a good tight clearance for these pumps. Just so you can see for reference. And sometimes you'll have to wiggle it around and it will go in place. Get the clamp locked in place there. Plug in the water supply. Hook your steering up. Make sure your drain plug is tight. Now we come up to the fuel pump. Make sure that that is pushed in. Sometimes you'll inadvertently have that pushed and you'll notice it that's what locks this connector in place. So if you accidentally release it, push it back to reset it, then you can put your fuel line in your tank. Then you can put your linkage. Hook your kill switch connector back up again. I always take the choke with my right hand. I slide it back with the left hand. There's your choke. Throttle. Pull back with the left hand. Use the right hand to guide the ball. And there's your throttle. Do not forget to hook your water line up, otherwise this is going to just fill your hull with water when you're going down the river. So this has got to be hooked up. Remember, do not forget, find some way somehow in your brain to make sure that you don't forget this. There's no valve in there to make sure it doesn't leak. They can't put a valve in there because you put a valve inside this situation and any kind of sand or anything that would normally pass through can get clogged up in there, and then you have a problem. So it's always running wide open. There's no valving in any of these connectors, and I explained that so that you don't put them in there. All right, and then we hook your control box back up again and your battery. If you want to use the pull start, you don't have to hook it up, you can leave it there. If you want to hook it back up, sometimes you pull out a little bit of slack there and you can screw it back in to the pull rope. Make sure that your pulley gets clipped back into that hook. But that's how you put the motor in and take it out and all that good stuff. When you're putting the hood on, drop it over the muffler, wiggle it back and forth until it finds its place in the air plenum. Typically, these will be lined up with each other when that happens. And to make sure that this discharge tube for the muffler is not stuck in there, I've been trimming these down so that that's not possible. But if you end up in that kind of situation and go down the river, you're just going to pump water into your hull. So I need to cut this one down, but I left it like that just to show you what can happen if you don't catch it. Starting is typically a matter of pulling the choke out, turning the key, turning the choke off, and it should idle. Some cases you don't even need the choke, so play with it, experiment with it. You'll come up with a routine that works best for you and your conditions in your boat. But that's pretty much everything. Other than the battery is down here, it's a 12-volt AGM like you'd find in a battery backup emergency lighting. So you have the little spade connectors there. You can charge the battery from there if you need to. Velcro is all that holds it in place. So that's the battery. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Catch me on the forum or on Facebook. And that's the Painless Mokai.